The NFL season is just about a week away, and this is when we make our final predictions, record predictions, Super Bowl predictions. Amir's back for the first time in what seems like a month. Amir, like I said, it feels like it's been about a month. You've been busy with camp. How's everything been? Of course, welcome back to the show.
It's been good, man. My body is beat down. I'm tired, but I mean, honestly, I'm just excited for the season to start. I was going through camp and I'm looking at the schedules, looking at the week one games, looking at my picks for week one already, because I'm that excited. I'm that excited.
Oh, absolutely. Well, pretty simply, you already see the AFC North on your screen. We're going to go through every single division. We're going to be giving you our record predictions, and these are based off a website. So, of course, these are accurate. And then, of course, we'll close it off with our playoff and Super Bowl picks. Let's get into the AFC North here. We're Browns fans, so some bias might be in play here. But if you see the numbers that are white here on the screen, that means that we have those teams making the playoffs. Pretty simple. We both have three teams, and it's the same three teams in the AFC North alone. Ravens at 12-5, Bengals at 12-5 for you, 10-7 for me, and the Browns, of course, you have them 2 games better on your side as well. Your thoughts on this division? And just to say that a team that is as talented as Pittsburgh on the defensive side of the ball is missing it is crazy. But your thoughts on this division?
This is obviously, still the best division in football. I think
No
that,
doubt.
NFC North is making that push, but I still think it's a noticeable gap. And I think, you know, it's gonna be, just like last year, how three teams made the playoffs. But, I'm not gonna lie, a couple of days ago, I was kind of looking at the structure of the AFC this year. I'm getting a little worried for Cleveland. I'm getting a little worried for us because I mean, seeing Deshaun constantly sit out of practices and games because of shoulder soreness and all that, you know, I'm not gonna lie. Last year we got kind of lucky. Joe Flacco decided to play like prime Tom Brady. So, hopefully, our defense can carry the load this year. I think our defense will be better because I mean, ultimately we did bring everybody back, and the fact that guys are going to be more experienced going into this year. But this without doubt is the best division of football. I think that it's going to be these three teams. I think that Baltimore and Cincy are going to be neck and neck in the regular season because Cincy definitely did get better. But ultimately, I think Baltimore's going to take this division for the second year in a row.
Yeah, I mean, Baltimore, such an incredible regular season team. They've been their entire tenure under John Harbaugh, and they get healthier. Of course, Zay Flowers is not going to be suspended or hurt or anything. He's going to be back. Mark Andrews is coming back, and that's a guy that was getting 30% of Lamar Jackson's targets last year. So their biggest offensive weapons back. They're only really missing Keaton Mitchell, but you bring in Derrick Henry. Of course, the defense is still there. The only thing I worry about Baltimore is the fact that they lost Mike McDonald. Of course, he
Hmm.
was the defensive coordinator, went over to Seattle, but of course, he led that talented defense last season. A little bit worried about that. But outside of that, they have Lamar, maybe a top five quarterback in the league. I think no doubt a top five guy in the league. And I think that pushes them over the edge. For the
Yeah.
Cincy and the Browns, you talked about it. Cincy, to me, you have a top three quarterback in Joe Burrow. You have T. Higgins is back. Of course, the contract situation isn't figured out, but he looks to be back this year. Jamar Chase, same thing as T. Higgins, but he should be back and ready for week one. The defense I worry about a little bit as far as that secondary, but again, when you have the offense that they do, they should be okay. And same thing you said about the Browns. A little bit worried about Deshaun Watson, but we should be okay. What I do want to say about Pittsburgh is we have the last couple weeks I've been coming to the defense of TJ Watt, and we'll talk about at the end of the show. But this defense is so good and it's so talented from top to bottom. The only issue is this team doesn't have their quarterback set in stone, whether if it's Russell Wilson, whether if it's Justin Fields. At the end of the day, the offensive line sucks, so I don't know if these quarterbacks are going to have a chance to play anyway. But this team just has a gauntlet of a second half of the schedule. If they didn't, then Pittsburgh, I think, would be in the playoff picture as well for the both of us. The AFC South, we both have Houston winning and taking the division. Indy is where we differ. You have them at 11-6. The last couple of days, I've you really taking my I guess expectations down about Indianapolis, and I have them at 9-8 as the first team outside of the playoffs. And the reason why is Anthony Richardson. I am a Gators fan. I will come to the defense of Anthony Richardson as much as I possibly can. But I'm a little bit worried about him, and I'm worried about his ability to push the ball down the field consistently and accurately enough to win some of these big time games that I have them winning on their schedule. And for example, just with his, you could tell he's not as comfortable as he was. Technically, this is going to be his rookie season, Amir. He barely played last year. There's going to be an adjustment period. Maybe this team loses some games they shouldn't. Regardless, I think they're a very good team this year. They show a lot of signs of greatness, but they come up just short at the very end. But your thoughts here about Indy? Why are they in the playoffs for you this year?
First of all, I want to say this. I've been saying this in the past. I'm not high on AR, as a lot of people are, but I kind of took those games and that sample size, with the grain of salt. And I kind of look at him, in Florida. He struggled, processing the field and also, utilizing his arm talent, his accuracy and stuff like that. And so for me, looking at Indy this past year, I keep saying that, seeing Gardner Minshew, lead this team, seeing them have quarterback changes, seeing them deal with, injuries and stuff like that, and still, one missed check down away from, making the playoffs and beating Houston, and kind of, being able to produce and score a lot of points against some great defensive teams, this past year, and kind of seeing AR, who I think is going to be better than Minshew. I don't know about how much, but I think he's going to be better. I think for him, him kind of learning for a year, kind of building in with that indie culture, still just being with the team, learning, Steichen's offensive stuff like that. I think that Indy, is going to be a good team. But I would say, it's between them, Cleveland, and Miami. Those three, I think, are the hardest teams to rank between, missing the playoffs and making the playoffs. I had a hard time really, struggling with those three teams. But for me, Indy, seeing, how great they were last year, you got, Pittman coming back and on a huge contract. Josh Downs was extremely underrated. Jonathan Taylor, who's going to be coming back finally healthy. I think that this team, is going to make a playoff push without a doubt.
Yeah, I think Leatu Latu is my defensive rookie of the year pick for Indy.
He's
Excited
going
to
to be
see what he
great.
can do. I think he's going to have a great start to his career. But for Indy, again, just a little bit worried. And this is also taking into account injuries, right? There's
Yeah.
no injuries in the AFC in our predictions. So everybody's healthy. And if it's healthy, or if everyone's healthy and there's no injuries, this is one of the most stacked conferences we've ever seen in the NFL, as far as like the number one team to like the number 12 team. But what's interesting about these is Jacksonville and Tennessee. We tend to differ here, as you can see, by a couple of games. You have Jacksonville 3 games under me, right? And then Tennessee 2 games as well. Tennessee has improved a lot, right, from the top down, but there's questions about their quarterback position. Jacksonville, on the other hand, they were the 1 seed in the AFC for the first half of last year, as crazy as that sounds. But they, of course, fell, they tumbled just as hard as the Eagles second half of the season. Your thoughts on those two teams? Why do you have them having such a down year this year?
You know, for Jacksonville, you know, kind of seeing them last year, the way they folded, seeing them honestly not really get any better, arguably get worse.
It was
It's
all you
also
needed to
seeing,
see.
I mean, the thing is, honestly seeing them, also have a tougher schedule this year. I mean, kind of reading off some of these names. I mean, they got, obviously the Colts twice who are even better. Houston twice who was even better. I mean, they got Miami. I mean, this thing about, I mean, their first, 6 games, they got Miami, Cleveland, Buffalo, Houston, Indy, Chicago.
That's
All
tough.
tough teams. And after that, I mean, week 8. I mean, week 8, you play against Green Bay, and then week 9, Philly, week 10, the Lions. And so, I mean, they have a gauntlet schedule,
That's
loaded
actually
schedule.
crazy.
And, and honestly, I mean, some tough teams, that second half of the schedule. And so, for them, I think it's more so the fact that, they're not only playing a gauntlet, but also I think this team, just didn't really get any better, but the division also got better. And
Yeah.
Tennessee, a team is similar there. I mean, Tennessee also got a pretty tough schedule as well, too. And, I'm high on Will Levis. I think he's going to be good. I don't know how good this year, but I mean, this team still has some holes. And, a few months ago, I kind of had them winning around 7 games when I really, broke down the schedule, really compared other teams and stuff like that. And I now have them at 5-12.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the Jacksonville, their schedule, just like Pittsburgh, just like some other teams, they have a stretch of just a gauntlet of games. And of course, if a team gets, not off to the start that they thought they would, sometimes a losing streak like that can completely derail a season. Tennessee, on the other hand, same there, right? Exactly the same thing that you said. Great defense. I believe Will Levis can be capable. New coaching staff there in Tennessee, so got to look out for that as well. But I just don't think that they have enough to make that push that a lot of people are having them as a surprise team this season. AFC East, we have the Bills, aka the 2015 Panthers reincarnated, as I've been saying the last couple of weeks. The Miami Dolphins and the Jets for me will make the playoffs. For you, it's just the New York Jets, and I'm happy that you're on the train as me, or the same train as me, right? As far as this New York Jets team, look, they have it all, and I've talked about it, for hours on end about on this channel about this New York Jets team this year. They have it all from the top down. They're healthy, right? They've improved their offensive line. They've added weapons. Their defense has gotten better, as crazy as that sounds, and younger, or not younger, but they've brought in Hassan Reddick, who was an All-Pro a couple years ago. My only worry about this Jets team is their head coach. I'm not going to project injuries with Aaron Rodgers, but if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, a 80% year for him, and this is what I like to say: if he's 80% of what he was in Green Bay, this team's going to be fine, and they're going to be great. And an 80% season for Rodgers is still top of the league in a lot of its statistics. I just worry about Robert Saleh because he hasn't proven much as a head coach, given he hasn't had much as a head coach. But I worry about the offensive, the production of this team under Robert Saleh in those big games. Outside of that, this team has it all to go out there and contend for a Super Bowl this year, in my opinion. Now, I gave the edge to Miami over Buffalo because of how much Buffalo lost. But again, Amir, I like to call this team 2015 Carolina Panthers because they have the MVP freak level quarterback, Cam Newton, Josh Allen. They have a good running back room. You had, of course, James Cook on one side, and I can't think of Jonathan Williams over there in Carolina. Subpar wide receiver rooms. Carolina had Ted Ginn and Devin Funches. And Buffalo, they got a rookie Keon Coleman and Curtis Samuel. Both had good tight ends in Dalton Kincaid and, of course, Greg Olsen. Great defenses to pair with those questionable coaching staffs at the time. Your thoughts on that comparison between Buffalo and Carolina? And I'm not going to say that this team goes out there and goes to the Super Bowl, wins 15 games like Carolina did, but your thoughts on that comparison?
You know, you know, me, I'm high on Josh Allen, right? Josh Allen is one of my favorite players in the league, but like you just mentioned, they just lost too much. Like if Josh Allen leads this team to the playoffs in this stacked AFC, I give him all the credit in the world. I will give him a lot of credit just for even making the playoffs with this team. Even if Joe Burrow was on his team and led his team to the playoffs and anchored, a top offense in the league, or Mahomes did the same exact thing, I give them a lot of credit. And in Miami, for me, I have Miami slightly missing the playoffs. I hope I'm not underrating them, or my bias with Cleveland is getting in the way. But I mean, my Miami, in my opinion, is going to be similar to last year. Obviously they have both their edge rushers still coming off of injuries, still being hurt. I mean, their secondary. I mean, Ramsey, he's getting older, he's aging. He's still great, but he's aging. I mean, Xavier Howard's still a free agent. If I'm not, mistaken. Javon Holland is obviously good, but I mean, last year, I mean, this team struggled, on the offensive line. Offensively, they're still great, but I mean, when you go ahead and you play against these great defenses on their schedule, like they're going to play, I mean, it's going to be tough for them. And to kind of go back to your point about Buffalo and Carolina, honestly, that's honestly a valid comparison as far as their personnel and teams and stuff like that. Is this I think that Carolina team was such an outlier.
It was.
It's right.
It
It's,
was,
it's
it
such
was
an
really
outlier
Cam
year
Newton
for
being Superman.
right. Exactly. And if Josh Allen was to do that, then hey, listen,
If
Josh
Josh
Allen,
Allen can get this team to win 12 games this year, I will officially be in the same club as you as far as saying that there's no doubt who the second best player in the league is anymore. Of course, outside of Patrick Mahomes. But again, outside of that, Buffalo, interesting season. Sometimes you want to believe less is more, and I guess we're going to be putting that to the test this year. Big year for Kincaid, big year for James Cook, and big year for this coaching staff. I think if they miss the playoffs, though, it's going to be time for a head coaching change there
yeah,
in Scott McDermott. Even though he's a good coach, sometimes eventually you just got to get over the hump. Eventually you got to make that deep playoff run. Miami, of course, same thing. I'm a little bit worried about this. Of course, the future of Mike McDaniel if he can't get this team at least into the playoffs yet again. Just because, again, eventually you need to change. But the Jets, of course, we have them taking the cake here. New England, I'm excited to see. This team is just super young. They have a lot of young players. And I'm excited to see who's going to take a step up. Is it Jalen Polk? Is it Ramondre Stevenson taking that next step? Is it some of these younger defensive pieces that with the departure of Matt Judon, they're going to be able to step up and make an impact this year? But this year, with Gerard Mayo as the new head coach, it's just about development.
Yeah.
In the AFC West, this is a historic year for one of these teams, and the other three, they're just trying to figure things out. For the Raiders, the Chargers, and the Broncos, like I said, they're just trying to figure things out, going in the right direction. The Raiders going with Minshew at quarterback. I want to know if you think that's the right move, or if they should go with the youth of Aiden O'Connell, especially because that's who Devontae Adams wants as his quarterback. The Chargers, Jim Harbaugh, first year. They're going to need an adjustment year, but I think they can surprise some people. We both have them winning more games than Vegas projects. And then for Denver, Bo Nix looked really good in preseason. He, of course, had a lot of college experience. He's going to get the job from day one. And I think, excuse me, I think with Bo Nix getting the job, I think that gave them an extra win or two in my projections, which is why I have them going 4-13. But your thoughts first off on the Raiders. Would you have started Aiden O'Connell with Devontae Adams wanting that, or do you think Minshew was the right move?
I mean, at the end of the day, as a head coach, right? I mean, for Vegas, you're kind of in a spot where it's like you want to win games. And personally, in my opinion, Gardner Minshew was better. Aiden O'Connell, that doesn't deserve to be the starter over Minshew. You can honestly make the argument that he has since he's been there. Kind of built that connection with his guys. But at the same time, I mean, at the end of the day, keep your whole entire team happy. Not just what one guy says. At the
Right.
end of the day,
He's not
Devontae
your
Adams
best
won.
player at the end of the day. So
Exactly. And so at the end of the day, you got to win games. And Vegas is kind of in a spot where it's like, if I'm Antonio Pierce, I'm like, I want to win games to kind of secure a head coaching spot. If I go ahead and try to purposely tank and throw a guy like O'Connell out there, my job is completely on the line because he's a guy that the team obviously wants. That the franchise is kind of taking a risk on letting him be a first year head coach for one entire season. And so if I'm him, I'm starting a guy that has more experience that's going to come in. Last year that was the leading quarterback for a team that potentially almost made the playoffs. And so if I am, Gardner Minshew is without a doubt my starter.
yeah, I think that was the right move as well. And I think Devontae might be in for a big year because Gardner Minshew is a one-read guy, right? He's
Yeah.
he's going to his number one guy. And last year in Indy, Michael Pittman had career numbers across the board with Minshew as his quarterback. Devontae, I think, can have a little bit of a resurgence here as far as being a top three level receiver. Like no doubt, right? Clear cut. For the Chargers, they're gonna control the ball. They're not gonna make many mistakes, and they're gonna clock a lot of these games, and they're gonna win a lot more games than they should. For the Chiefs, look, we know the spiel. It's a historical year upcoming for them. They're going for history. The first ever team to three-peat has yet to happen. Chiefs look to do that this season, and they've only gotten better. Defense has gotten better outside of losing L'Jarius Sneed. The offense, you add Xavier Worthy, you add Hollywood Brown, who will be back eventually after that neck injury. Of course, Kelsey's still there. The offensive line is still good. Pacheco is ready to take that bell cow role and be a three-down guy for them. They have it all to do it. They just need to be healthy, and they need Pat Mahomes to be Patrick Mahomes, which is, of course, one of the best players we've ever seen. I have them at 13-4, losing some of those big games to Buffalo, losing one to San Fran along the way. You have them, however, going 15-2. If you have it pulled up, Amir, I just want to know what two teams do you have Kansas City losing to? Because for a team that's on their, on route to making history, to have only two losses, it looks like they're going to have a pretty good chance to do it. What are the two teams they lose to on your schedule? Whenever you could pull it up.
So for me, surprisingly, I have them. First of all, I don't like to jump the gun and put crazy records out there. And I was kind of looking at my predictions for this year for certain teams, and I was like, okay, listen, like I gotta make sure some of these records are realistic because the NFL is weird.
Right.
The Chiefs could end up winning 10 straight and then end up losing to like the Patriots at home, something random like that. And so my prediction is I have the Chiefs going ahead and rallying off 14 straight wins.
Oh, Jesus.
Or
And then they
actually, no,
lose to the
15
boys.
straight wins, going 15-0, other than their first loss in Week 16, to the Houston Texans. That's what I have.
I
And
have them
I don't like to jump the
15 as
gun
well.
and put crazy records out there, but I genuinely believe that this team, coming off a crazy Super Bowl win, coming in and guys coming back, like Rice is coming back, Xavier Worthy had another speedster out there. He looked really great during the offseason and stuff like that. The defense is obviously still great. And so I think with this team could legitimately, be absolutely crazy. And also, I have Mahomes also, doing big things numbers wise this year. We'll get into that later on, but I have them, winning 15 straight, week 16, losing to Houston, winning week 17 against Pittsburgh, and that week 18 game at this point, you honestly lost the game. You can't, complete history, with going undefeated. So at this point, having the rest of the stars and losing to Denver.
Losing to Denver, that's an interesting one, especially because Denver would be 1-15 at that point going into the final week. But I mean, hey, that's one of those confidence builder games for Denver. But let's talk about this real quick. So just to clarify everything, we'll do this for the NFC as well. This is how my AFC playoff picture looks. The Chiefs, Jets, Baltimore, and Houston in that order win their divisions and they get top 4 seeds. Kansas City, of course, gets a bye. Wild card teams in order, Miami, which I wasn't expecting going into these predictions. I didn't think they were going to make the playoffs in my predictions, to be honest. Cincy as a 6th seed and the Browns at 9-8 sneak in over teams like Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Indy, and they get that last spot. Maybe it's my bias, maybe not. But this is how that playoff picture looks. Kansas City, of course, is waiting on the lowest seed remaining, but the Jets and Browns, straight defense in that matchup. It's really going to be which quarterback steps up. Is it Rodgers or is it Deshaun Watson? Divisional matchup, you got to have those at some point in the playoffs. Baltimore and Cincy for the 3rd time. Of course, I have them splitting their season series. So the rubber match here in the 1st round. Houston, Miami, interesting matchup. Houston comes in, I think, a more well-rounded team. But, I mean, hey, when you can't really say that you have a guaranteed win when you have a guy like Tyreek Hill coming in on the opposite side. Interesting matchups there in the 1st round for me. But Amir, take it over. These are this is how your playoff picture looks.
So this is going to look crazy. The fact that, there's 4 12-5 teams, but,
All
I've been
7
saying
have
this,
double-digit wins.
right? I've been saying this in the past. I think the NFL this year is extremely top heavy. I think that, you have some really, really great teams and there's some really, really bad teams, and it's a drop off. But, I think this is going to be one of the greatest and most entertaining years of football we've ever seen. Last year, it's kind of the year of defenses out of nowhere. I mean, the past years, this past decade, offenses have, had a crazy resurgence. It's been a pass heavy league, but last year it was kind of defenses taking over,
Yes.
defenses winning big games, and quarterbacks struggling. This year, I think it'll be the opposite. I think offenses are going to be even greater. I think that teams are going to, absolutely just dominate. And so, I have KC as the 1 seed, obviously. Then I have Houston, Baltimore, and New York, all tied. And it basically all coming down to, week 18,
Tiebreakers for
who's going
them.
to get the higher seed and stuff like that. And so for the wild card, I have Cincy, 12-5. Also, I think Cincy's going to be just on the brink of winning the division. But, Baltimore, just like me, you always say, they're a great regular season team. They're always going to find a way to, be at the top of the league, in the regular season. Then I have Indy and Cleveland tied at 11-6. And, with the website that we use, Indy, came over top as far as seeding.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we use the Playoff Predictors website. If you haven't used it yet, go check it out. Great website, kind of does all this formatting for you. But here's Amir's playoff picture. I see a rematch there, Amir, with the 2-7. But your thoughts on your 1st round matchups?
So I have Houston and Cleveland, part 2. If they're to face off, Browns, I love you, but Houston would, probably blow us out again, to be honest. I have Baltimore and Indy, and then, the Jets and Cincy, which I think is a very interesting matchup. I think
Yeah,
out of all these games, I would love to watch that game.
absolutely. Well, let's get over to the NFC side of things. We're going to do the same thing here. Of course, we'll recap here at the end, give you a Super Bowl matchup, all that good stuff. NFC North picture, though. We are both high on this team, just like the rest of America. The Detroit Lions. This is a team that if they didn't rely so much on their guts and their analytical minds last year and just used their football minds, took a step back, this is a team that was up 24-7 on the Niners at halftime. If they just kicked a couple field goals along the way, if they didn't go for every single 4th down, we could have been talking about a Detroit Lions, Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl 58. But, things happen. They went for it a lot. They didn't get a lot of them in the 2nd half. They lose that game. This offseason, they get better, right? And, of course, they were able to maintain Ben Johnson as their offensive coordinator. I think that was the biggest thing that could have happened for them this offseason. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs is dealing with a little bit of a hamstring injury at the moment, but he should be back by week 1, if not week 2. This team is the same exact team, but better going into next season. They have a relatively easy schedule for saying that they were the 1 seed last year. And I think they go 13-4. You have them 1 game better. We flip flop on the Green Bay Packers. I have them one game better. You have them one game worse. And the only big thing that we're different on here in this list is that, for one, you have three NFC North teams making the playoffs. First time that's happened in a long time, maybe ever. And then you also have the Bears making the playoffs. I don't. I have them going 8-9, super solid team, just with their youth at the quarterback position. Maybe they lose a couple games they shouldn't. And I'm also not sold on Eberflus yet. But your thoughts on these on this division? Of course, the Vikings. We'll talk about them too really quickly. A lot of injuries, right? Quarterback situation's not great. Kirk Cousins left town. Daniel Hunter left town. Just not a great offseason for Minnesota. This is really going to be a big year for Kevin O'Connell to just show himself, right? Show his ass, and just to show he's a top elite coach in the league. But even if he does, they just don't have the talent to compete with teams that are on their schedule. Your thoughts on this division, though, Amir?
So, Detroit, last year, I went through a stretch where I was calling them overrated. But,
Yep.
I kept constantly saying, once they kind of get that confidence booster even more, they can be great. And they did. And, last year, in the playoffs, I mean, I really thought, they're really going to go all the way and possibly win it. But, I mean, they just happened to run into, the greatest, 49ers quarterback in NFL history. So, I
Oh,
mean, they
okay.
kind of fell short. And so, I think that coming into this year, the fact that I'm looking at this past preseason game, and I don't even watch the preseason. But, I turn it on. I see in the Lions, home crowd go ahead and cause false starts in a preseason game. Like, that's insane. And I think this year the whole entire city's on their back. And it doesn't matter what record you are, what personnel, what team you have. If you have momentum in the NFL, every player is great. If you have momentum, if you have the hype behind you, you're gonna win games. And the fact that Detroit not only has arguably the most loaded roster in the league, but they have all the confidence in the world to go ahead and make something happen, I think it's going to pay off.
Yeah,
But
hold on.
actually,
Move
I
on.
want to correct it though. Green Bay and Chicago. Actually, I have Green Bay missing the playoffs,
You
and
do.
yeah, I do. And so I'm going to kind of make the same prediction similar to what you had. When last year you made a prediction where it was like, it's going to come down to the game between Mahomes versus Jordan Love. Jordan
I
Love is
went
going
to
to beat
Jordan Love.
Mahomes right, and take off. And my prediction is that you know it's going to come down to Week 18, Caleb versus J Love. I'm taking Caleb to go ahead and bounce Green Bay out the playoffs.
That one hurts. I want to sidetrack here. I want to backtrack here rather. Is Colin Kaepernick, biased aside, is he better than Brock Purdy as far as all-time San Francisco quarterbacks? Both went to one Super Bowl. Because obviously you're saying best quarterback in San Fran history. There's some jokes there, but is he even better than Colin Kaepernick? Does he crack the
Okay, now
top
listen.
three
Now
for
this
San
this is
Fran quarterbacks?
look. Now, this is a great question. Me personally, I wouldn't jump the gun and say Purdy is just yet. I'm making jokes. Obviously,
I was
when I hype
joking. I
Purdy up.
would. I think Kaepernick was a he was a he benefited from that system.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he definitely did. But the problem with me is, you know me. I don't like to use recency bias or jump the gun, or take sample sizes. Obviously, Purdy did it for half a season and also a full season. But I think coming into this year, if he plays absolutely amazing, I think I'm ready to easily jump that gun and put him over top.
Well, I'm gonna stick with Jordan Love here. I'm a big Jordan Love guy. I'm gonna have Jordan Love in Detroit making the playoffs. My NFC playoff picture looks a lot similar to last year. I think there's only one or two teams that are different. But your thoughts here? Do you think the Bears are really ready to make that jump? Of course, they have all the talent that they need. This is maybe the best situation a rookie has ever walked into as the number one pick and at the quarterback position at such a young stage in his career. Do you really think they're ready to make that playoff push in year number one? And if it does, a little two-parter here. What do you think that means for the trajectory of Caleb Williams? Do you think that we would look at him as this is a guy that could be in that Mahomes conversation?
I think Caleb is going to be amazing. I've been saying this for a while. Just based off of talent alone, I think it's going to be amazing. And I think for him, he's not only coming into a talented situation, but also around older vets that'll kind of help him mature faster.
Yeah.
And I think the only problem that we have as fans, as non-casual fans, the casual fans will say it's going to be a bust, which is crazy. But in our eyes, we kind of question his leadership and him just growing up and kind of taking that leadership role off rip. And so I think for the Chicago team, looking at him last year, that second half of the year, once they got Montez Sweat, once Jalen Johnson, completely turned into an all-pro level corner, even more, I think that, them kind of finding that recipe defensively, of how they can really attack the season. And I think coming into this year, the fact that, they basically have the entire defense coming back, I think that, defensively they're going to be amazing, but offensively, I mean, they added way too much for me not to put them in the playoffs. I mean, they added, DJ Moore's obviously going to be back. He's going to be great. You add Keenan Allen, you draft, a Dunze, and, you also bring in Caleb Williams, who, his last year in USC, he kind of, was in a bad situation as far as, his team not only being injured, but also, I mean, that USC team defensively was terrible week in and week out, and he was still playing great. And so, for Green Bay, J Love is still great, in my opinion. But Green Bay, last year they kind of started the year off, slow. And, I understand that this year, Matt LaFleur came out and said that, Green Bay's receiving core is going to be like a committee receiving core where, it's not going to be one true number one.
That's
But
how
in
it was
my
last
opinion,
year.
right, yeah, just like last year. But in my opinion, I think that, it's going to be the same problems that Aaron Rodgers dealt with, where it's like, he wants a true number one. He wants more guys around him. Obviously, he had Tay Adams, but he wants more guys around him to really rely on and have safety blankets. And I think, that's going to eventually catch up to them this year. So that's why I have Chicago over them.
Yeah, no, I mean, my only argument there is Green Bay, not much could have went worse for them last year. Of course, they had by far and away the most
Good
offensive
point.
line combinations. Christian Watson and this entire receiving core were hurt throughout stretches of the season. Their defense was banged up, and Jordan Love still managed to get them on a second half run because the first half of the year, Jordan Love wasn't great, and this team wasn't great, but they were able to make that second half push. That's why I still have them making it. Now, again, barely. I think Chicago's my first or second team out the playoffs, but definitely an interesting division. The NFC South will make this one quick, and we'll start from the bottom. I think New Orleans, it's going to be a bad year. Sorry, New Orleans fans. I think Chris Olave might have a good year. Same can be said about AK-47. Of course, Alvin Kamara. He wears 41, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Yeah, 41.
41.
Regardless, right? AK-41. We'll say that. I think it's just going to be a year where, look, their defense is solid. I think they have the worst head coach in the league, and I think they have, at this point in time, a below average quarterback. When you suffer at those two positions, I just think it's going to be very hard to justify winning more than, let's say, 5 games throughout the season. Tampa Bay, look, they lost Dave Canales. I think we're underrating the impact of that. And I think the impact of Dave Canales is so huge that I have Carolina winning 7 football games this year. We saw Bryce Young in those preseason games. It's preseason, right? Shell defenses. But Bryce Young looks so comfortable, and he made so many of those magical plays that we saw at Alabama so far this preseason. He's getting the ball out quickly. This offensive line has gotten better, and it's holding him up. It's giving him a second to process the field. This team offensively has gotten better. Defensively has gotten better. I believe Bryce Young, I'm not a Bryce Young believer, but I believe he's an above average quarterback, eventually down the line. And I think Dave Canales coming in, being that just in his ear, helping him along the way. This Carolina team's going to shock some people this year. I haven't even mentioned how talented their secondary is, led by J.C. Horn. I do worry a little bit about losing a guy like Brian Burns. However, in this division, they can rack up a lot of their wins, right? And I think they can manage a 7-10 season. Your thoughts on these bottom 3 teams?
Yeah, I mean, you honestly hit on the perfect. New Orleans, obviously, defensively, they're always going to be solid. But, Derek Carr last year was not it. Dennis Allen is not a good coach. And so I think at this point, I think the Saints are kind of looking at it as like, all right, listen, I mean, either we're going to be, pushing for a mediocre record, or we're going to tank, move off, off Derek Carr, and get, Carson Beck or Shedeur Sanders. And so I think for them, that's the direction they're moving in. And so Tampa Bay, you hit on it perfectly. Them losing Dave Canales is way too overlooked. I mean, he completely helped, resurrect not only Geno's career. I mean, he literally reached into Geno's career and brought Geno from the dead, literally,
Yeah.
which is crazy. And Tampa Bay, I mean, he literally made Baker, kind of get back on track. Baker
First
obviously,
Pro Bowl
already
of his
had
career.
right, exactly, help Baker get paid. And so, Bryce Young is going to be the same exact thing. I just have Carolina at 5-12 just for the simple fact. I mean, they still have a lot of holes on both sides of the ball, but I think this year you can look at Bryce Young, look at this team, and be like, okay, listen, we got something here. We can keep on building around them. Have a low pick. Either address the offensive line even more, or go ahead and trade up. Grab another receiver. Help defensively and stuff like that around him. And so I think this year is kind of just a preview of Bryce Young kind of showing the future.
Yeah, I think ironically, even though Carolina doesn't win the division, I think I have them having the best record as far as divisional play in this division. I think I have them at like 4-2 in the division this year. So again, when I say they rack up a lot of their wins in this division, I mean it. For Atlanta, look, they continue to get better. They brought in Matt Judon. They brought in Justin Simmons. This defense was already elite last year, and it's only gotten better. They had the best offensive line per PFF last year in, of course, last season. They bring in Kirk Cousins, right? They have Drake London ready to take that step. Kyle Pitts is finally trying to show he was worth that top 4 selection. Bijan's amazing. They have a great offensive mind coming in to run this offensive on the offensive coordinator. Raheem Morris is now here from the Rams, so it's going to be a McVay-led system. Your thoughts on the Falcons, man? I think everybody has this team winning this division.
Yeah, I think they'll win this division with ease. I mean, I think they could win this division with eight wins. If they
Right.
really wanted to. But this team, honestly, is a team where it's like in the playoffs, I think they'll be underwhelming. But I would say, this team is either going to be, you
Elite.
know, either really, really good and shock a lot of people, or kind of just, right at that 9 to the 10 win mark, not in between that. And but I mean, last year, I mean, this team with Desmond Ritter looked like, that they had some potential to be a really good team. I mean, they had, a great offensive line, like you just mentioned, Bijan, who has a lot of promise, a bunch of promise and potential. My only concern, is that receiving core. How was that, receiving core going to kind of, help Kirk Cousins, coming in for his first year in Atlanta. But I mean, in a division like this, I think without a doubt they'll take this division with ease.
We both have Philly winning it by a large margin at 13-4. Dallas coming in behind because that's what Dallas does. They're gonna make the playoffs. It doesn't matter how much they lose or how much they gain. They're gonna make the playoffs seemingly every year, and they're gonna have 10 to, let's say, 13 wins. But we both have them coming in second in this division, and we'll circle back to these teams at the top. But when we go down to the bottom, for the Giants, you had a great offseason. It's just about Daniel Jones, in my opinion. Amir, I'll let you touch on it. But adding Brian Burns, you still have Dexter Lawrence. Of course, you added some other defensive talent to this team. You brought in, of course, Malik Neighbors to be your true alpha number 1 wide receiver. Devin Singletary was solid in stretches last year. You lost Darren Waller, but you bring in Theo Johnson, and I've talked to you about that on the show before. That is Jimmy Graham. If you look at their intangibles on paper and their, I guess, combine stats, that is Jimmy Graham reincarnated in Theo Johnson. And we got a report the other day that he's going to have a big role in this offense. So this team has the talent. I'm not exactly sold on Brian Daboll, and I'm not sold on Daniel Jones. And if you see a common trend here with my predictions, if you struggle at those 2 positions, head coach and quarterback, I can't see much of a great outlook for you going into the season. Excuse me. But your thoughts on the Giants and maybe even the Commanders?
I would say for the Giants, in my opinion, I have them winning 5 wins. Not because of the offense, because of that defensive line. And the thing about the NFL is like if you can, run the football, stop the run, and win the turnover battle, you honestly can win games. And I think for this defensive line, I have them winning 5 games just because that D line is the best in the league in my opinion. Which
Oh,
is
wow.
so random. Which is so random for a team, like the Giants. And so, you brought up a great point about Daniel Jones and Dable. Personally, I don't mind Dable, but Daniel Jones is not it. Daniel Jones should not have gotten a huge contract. I think they jumped the gun, offer him that contract, and I thought, it's coming back to haunt them. Now for Washington, personally, 3 wins I think is definitely a little too low, especially because I think Jalen Daniels is going to be good. What I worry for, is that defense. Them basically getting rid of their whole entire D line, mid-season last year and kind of seeing how much they struggled, seeing how bad the offensive line was and the fact that you go ahead and you trade Jahan Dotson. And also, I personally believe that, Scary Terry also, isn't going to spend the entire year in Washington as well. I think that this team, honestly lost a lot, and they're really going to struggle because of it.
Yeah, there's no other team in the entire the NFL, Amir, that we differ more on as far as win total. There's a 4 wins difference here between you and me with Washington, and I wanted you to touch on them first because I do believe in Dan Quinn. I do believe in Jaden Daniels, well, Dan Quinn to an extent. I believe this is a team that, with their defense, is going to be solid. Of course, Emmanuel Forbes is not what they hoped he was going to be. Outside of that, though, very solid defense from the top down. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if this team just runs out 3 defensive tackles next year with Johnny Newton out of Illinois, and then you have Deron Payne and John Allen. Just run 3 straight defensive tackles every play. They're going to cause some problems for offensive lines. But I think Jaden Daniels, with his dynamic playmaking ability, they can make some things happen this year. And Cliff Kingsbury is going to get the absolute most as far as statistics out of Jaden Daniels this year, just like he did with Kyler Murray for so many years in Arizona. So for that reason, and again, for I think a lot of their wins can come in this division. Um, Saying that they play these teams twice, but I think Washington getting 6 to 7 wins, I think this year is definitely in the cards. So that's where I have them. But let's talk about these top two teams. Of course, the Philadelphia Eagles at 13-4. They crumbled last season, is a good way to put it. They started off the year 11-1. And after that, they ran into a gauntlet of teams, and everything pretty much went downhill after that. For Dallas, they took advantage of that tumble, and they went and stole the division second half of the year. Dak had a great year. CD had a career year across the board, and then they would go on again to win the division. But these two teams, they're just the best two teams in the division. They're two of the best teams in the NFC. Philly has only gotten better. Dallas, questionable. They just lost Deron Payne, one of their cornerbacks, for a 6 to 8 weeks. So something to look out for Dallas. But it's the last dance there in Dallas this year. Mike McCarthy, it's a prove-it year. It's a prove-it year for pretty much all their big stars. I think they can get at least to the playoffs, and in typical Dallas fashion, probably knocked out in the first round. For Philly, again, you add Saquon Barkley, you lose Jason Kelce, but outside of losing Jason Kelce, you've done only good. Bringing in Bryce Huff, only getting younger and getting rid of the headache of course, Hassan Reddick. You bring in, of course, Kellen Moore to run the offense. You still have the talented receiving core. Jalen Hurts is there. Your thoughts on this team, Amir? Of course, these two top teams.
Hey, I ain't gonna lie. Howie Roseman might be the Brad Stevens of the NFL. This man just keep on, fleecing teams, loading up his roster. And you brought up a great point. Losing Jason Kelce, and I don't want to undervalue, how important them losing that is. But the fact that they go ahead and they build everything else up around that. I mean, you add Saquon, like you just mentioned. Hopefully, Saquon can stay healthy. Even if he doesn't, the team is still loaded. I mean, defensively, you go ahead and you address the biggest issue, which was that secondary. You bring back C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You go ahead, you draft Cooper the Genius, who you can move around all across the field. You still have some young, talent. You got Ringo, you got Eli Ricks. Some guys who still have upside that can still develop and learn behind vets. You also bring in a new D coordinator. I forgot his name, but this team as a whole is loaded. And now Dallas, on the other hand, you brought up a great point. It's a prove year, for Dak, for this entire team as a whole. Obviously, CD's still waiting to get paid. I think he will get paid. But honestly, I mean, this team is so weird because every year they have the roster, they have the person, they have the team. But, I think it's cultural issues. I think, once they get to those moments, I don't know if it's the leadership up at the top or what it is, but this team just crumbles. And I think it'll be the same thing this year.
What's funny is, like, especially in fantasy football, you try and like look for those players that are in contract years because historically players play their best in those contract years. And typically you only have one or two of those big names. For Dallas, it's really a contract year for everybody. From Mike McCarthy down, it's a contract year because I think anybody and everybody can be moved after this season. I mean, if you just look at some of their guys on offense, Dak, Zeke, Zach Martin, all-pro guy that's been there for feels like 20 years. CeeDee Lamb, of course, Brandon Cooks is on a contract year. That's a lot of their offense. Defensively, Micah Parsons is a top 5, top 10 defender in the league. He's up for a contract this year. You're going to have to extend Trayvon Diggs as well coming up here soon. It is a contract year for everybody in Dallas. But hey, maybe, good thing they got the richest owner in the league as of this moment. That always helps. For the NFC West, we'll finish up here and then we'll, of course, do a recap. San Francisco. I do worry a little bit. I think this is a team that can be better this year, but with a worse record, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
San Francisco, I think, will go 12-5. On paper, you're like, that's a little bit of underperforming, especially because this team's won 13 and 14 games the last couple of years. But I think they go 12-5. Again, losing some games they probably shouldn't. Maybe they, lose track, lose focus on some of these teams that are in their division. They, again, lose some of these games they shouldn't. But I think they're going to be a better team this year going in to hopefully finally get over the hump with this talented core. For the Rams, Amir, last year, we both had like about 70% correct pick rate for the entire NFL season. We get to the postseason, and we say the Rams are going to beat the Detroit Lions. Not only that, but we said they're going to the NFC title game. Of course, they lost that first postseason game, but obviously we're both really high on the Rams. We need Puka to
Yeah.
get healthy and to play again like he did last year. This team lost Aaron Donald, which cannot be replaced. It doesn't matter if you grab Myles Garrett, you cannot replace Aaron Donald. But you bring in that FSU core, right, of Brandon Fisk. You bring in Jared Verse. You still have Byron Young on the edge. This team, I think, has it all to go back this year and to potentially steal this division. But your thoughts on these top two teams?
Man, I'm not gonna lie. This Rams team, if I'm a team in the NFC, this team, honestly scared me. And,
Yes.
this team is either gonna be, one of those teams where they kind of cruise through the regular season, win 11 games, gets to the playoffs, and they're a tough matchup, or they're gonna be great from start to finish. And I think that this team's gonna be great from start to finish. And so, I think, you brought up a great point. I mean, this team defensively, they went ahead and addressed those issues. Obviously Aaron Donald leaving is a huge loss, but they went ahead and built everywhere around that. And they bring in the pieces in the secondary. They bring back Darius Williams. They go ahead and bring in Tre'Davious White, who's going to be healthy this year. And so offensively, I mean, you got Puka, you got Cooper Cup finally back. Hopefully he's healthy. You got Puka, you got, Sean McVay coming out saying that Cooper Cup, say he's coming for everything this year. He's coming, with the revengeance.
Revenge story, yep.
Exactly. Kyron Williams, hopefully he can stay healthy. He was the top 5 back in the league, this past year. And so I think this Rams team is going to be on the brink of possibly stealing this division. San Fran, on the other hand, San Fran is a team where it's like, it's kind of like Baltimore, where it's like, in the offseason, people sometimes might, get used to them being good to where they're kind of just like, all right, whatever. But then, the season comes and they're blowing teams out. And I think San Fran isn't going anywhere. I think Kyle Shanahan, as long as you have Shanahan as a coach, the same with the Rams, as long as you have McVay, they're going to be great. And so, only thing I worry is, the right side of this O-line, just say last year, the O-line still, didn't really improve much. But, I mean, overall, I mean, you basically still have the same exact, offense back as far as Debo. I think they're going to pay Brandon Ayuk. They have Christian McCaffrey still and George Kittle, who's going to be, healthy this whole season, possibly. But I think this team is going to be great and take this division by 1 game.
Yeah, no, again, this division has 2 of the top 3 coaches in the NFL. Of course, throw Andy Reid into the mix, that's your top 3. But again, both these teams, they're gonna do really good this year. Like you mentioned, it can go either way with this division. We both have San Fran taking it by 1 game. The last thing I'll say about San Fran, if they can't get it done this year, is this the most talented core that's never been able to get over the top as far as talent on both sides of the ball? All I'm saying is that they have an argument to just be, they just keep running it to the best player in the world and they can't get over the hump. But this might be one of the best cores of teams, I guess, that have never been able to get it done. Seattle here in Arizona, both at the bottom. Seattle, I have at 8-9. This is a team that I think Ken Walker's going to have his best season. Mike McDaniel bringing him in, Mike McDonald, excuse me, to run this team. He's a defensive mind, led that Baltimore Ravens defense last year. They have a lot of talented pieces on this defense. They're going to dominate, I think, this season. It's Geno Smith that I worry about a little bit, but I think they're going to protect the football, and they're going to be a team like the Chargers, where with defensive-minded head coaches, you're going to protect the football, make minimal mistakes, and you're going to be able to win those 1 or 2 possession games pretty often. Arizona, look, I'm a Kyler Murray fan. I think that this team is going to be, I guess they're going to shock a lot of people. Of course, K1 is a top 10 quarterback when he's healthy, and he's going. Trey McBride is only getting better. James Conner is still a serviceable starting running back. You bring in maybe the most talented wide receiver prospect we've ever seen in Marvin Harrison. The defense, there's a lot of questions. I understand that, but I think for the Arizona Cardinals, I trust Kyler, basically, is my lasting point there. But your thoughts on these bottom 2 teams?
Hey, I ain't gonna lie. This Seahawks team is gonna be, so I have them winning 6 games, but they're one of those teams where it's like it's a really good, 6-win team. And I think that defensively, this is gonna be a great defense in this league. I mean, they have, I say this all the time. The fact that you have, you have Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen kind of anchoring that secondary. I wish they would have brought back Quandre Diggs. Re-sign him, pay him. But I mean, in the draft, they go ahead, address that D line. Draft some D line pieces up front. And offensively, I mean, the biggest concern is Geno. I think they need to move off of Geno, kind of, either make a trade for somebody or pay somebody. Maybe, I mean, this next offseason, you can pay a guy like Dak who's going to be a free agent, possibly. But, I mean, this team has some pieces on both sides of the ball. So I think that, they'll be 6-12 just because of, some of the tough teams that they face.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, this team will be far better than their record.
Dak in Seattle is something I've never thought about. So interesting point you bring up there. But clarify for me, Amir, are they 5-12 in your rankings or 6-11? Of course, 6-12 is
Oh,
not possible.
okay, yeah,
And that's a
okay,
typo on my end, just like Green Bay earlier in the episode. So also remind me about Green Bay. We'll run through that when we get there for your playoff predictions. Are they 6 and
okay,
11
yeah.
or 6-11 or 5-12?
Okay, so in my rankings, I have the Seahawks at 6 and 11.
6-11. Okay, so that was just a typo on my end. But any last thoughts about this division here, Amir?
Not really. I think this division, obviously those two teams is a noticeable gap. But like you mentioned with Arizona, Arizona is also a team, who can shock a lot of people. I think that they're missing just way too much, on the defensive side of the ball for me to really put them over, 5 wins. But I could very well see them winning 7 games. Based off of last year, seeing them, win some big games once Kyler came back and the team looking somewhat serviceable. The fact that you add Marvin Harrison, I think Marvin Harrison is coming to, a pretty good situation for a top 3 pick. And so I think for him, he's going to get a lot of targets. He's going to be a true number one and, look like a absolute vet day one.
Yeah, and not to keep circling back, but I've been raving about Kyler Murray and this team all off season, not only because he's my favorite quarterback in the league, but also for the fact that this was a top 10 offense in yards, in points, in yards per play when Kyler Murray returned last year. So again, you just need an elite quarterback and your team can win a lot more games than you expect. But here's my NFC playoff picture. Of course, Detroit gets the number 1 seed. Philly, San Fran, Atlanta both are all win their divisions. The Rams, Dallas, and Green Bay, of course, will take the wild card the same way that these teams were in the wild card last year. Well, Dallas, Philly, they switched. And of course, the only new team I have in the playoffs in the NFC this year is the Atlanta Falcons over the Tampa Bay Bucks. But here's how my playoff picture looks. We have Philly and Green Bay at the 2-7 matchup. Interesting matchup. Of course, I think Philly got the upper hand early last year, but we didn't get to see that second half Jordan Love play the Eagles. So something we're going to have to look out for because Jordan Love's only getting better. Interesting matchup there. Historical matchup here with San Fran and Dallas. It doesn't go too well for Dallas in this matchup, but San Fran, I think, would definitely get the upper hand. And then Atlanta and the Rams. Interesting matchup. Two teams that have good offenses and good defenses. I guess it's all just going to depend on who has the ball last in a game like this. But of course, I would give the edge to the Rams if that was the case. But your NFC playoff predictions, and it looks like I did already have the Green Bay mistake fixed. So just go ahead whenever you're ready.
So for me, I have, Detroit, running away with that 1 seed. With that second seed, San Fran, and then following after that, Philly and Atlanta. I think, those top 3 seeds, it's a noticeable gap between, that 4th seed, obviously, because that division is weaker. But, the wild card teams that have the Rams just outside of that with 12-5, a game behind San Fran. And I have Dallas as a 6th and Chicago sneaking in at that 7th spot. And so for the wild card matchup, at the end of the day, Chicago isn't ready, for a team like San Fran. Honestly, they're not ready for, any of these teams. The only team is possibly Atlanta and maybe Dallas. And so, I have San Fran, mopping the floor with them game 1. I have Philly, dominating this Dallas team. I don't think Dallas will be ready for Philly. I think Philly is way too loaded. Even if Jalen Hurts was to take a step back this year, I think they're going to be loaded. And so, for me, I'm taking the Rams over Atlanta, any day of the week. I love Kirk Cousins. I love that team that they have going on, but I think the Rams have too much, and Sean McVay is way too experienced of a coach.
Well, that leads us to our NFC or our Super Bowl predictions. And it's hard to, just sit here and be like, okay, well, these are 1 season each conference. But at the end of the day, these are preseason predictions. This is how much we believe in each of these teams. Amir and me share the same, or Amir and I rather, share the same exact Super Bowl matchup. Detroit on one end, Kansas City on the other. The opener last season, Kansas City didn't have all their guys, but still, the opener last year, and we were so close to having it to start and end the year last season. Detroit, of course, didn't get their end of the job done. And now we're going into this year, and this is, I think, going to be the matchup. Detroit has it all. Same with Kansas City. These teams have only gotten better this year, and they're both hungry for different reasons. No pun intended with the Lions, of course. But Amir, your quick thoughts about this matchup, and who do you have winning it?
So for this matchup, I've said this for months. I think, this year, these playoffs are going to be some of the most fun playoffs to watch. I mean, there's going to be loaded offenses, loaded defenses as well, loaded quarterbacks. And so I would say, the matchup, the team that I have winning this matchup, I have Kansas City. I have Kansas City, being the first three-peat in NFL history. I think if there's any team to do it, it would be them. The fact that, everybody's kind of banking on the fact that, Mahomes will be the greatest quarterback ever, which I think he will be. I'm not going to jump the gun and say he is just yet because I don't like recency bias. But I think, this year's going to add to his legacy, add to the fact that, he's, we're basically just, in his legacy.
Yeah. You touched on everything there perfectly for the Kansas City Chiefs. If we get to this matchup, I would want Kansas City to win. So just to clarify, I would want to, or I would predict them to win. Let me say that. I'll predict them to win because again, first three-peat, we're never gonna see a three-peat again, but we will see other franchises win their first Super Bowl. Teams like Detroit, Houston, and teams of that nature. The Browns, hopefully. But I will predict the Chiefs to win it, but I will hope that the Detroit Lions take it home, man. As a Browns fan, we know the struggle of a poor franchise, for years on years, decades on decades. And for the Lions to even be in this situation, the fan in me would want them to win this game, even though I love Mahomes as much as the next person. But again, I would predict the Chiefs, hope for the Lions. I'm going to close off the show here. Amir, give us your award predictions. Now, last week I gave you guys mine here on the show. It was tons of fun, so if you missed it, go check it out. But Amir, run through your award predictions before we get out of here.
So, I don't like to, just put, the best player in the league or, a top three player in the league for winning MVP every year, when I make predictions. But I think this year, Kansas City will be way too good for voters, media voters to overlook the fact that Mahomes is the best player in the league. So I have him, winning MVP this year, anchoring that top, that top power ranking in the league with the Kansas City Chiefs. And so for my offensive player of the year, I think Tyreek Hill will finally, win his first offensive player of the year, this year. I think that, it won't be last year where it's like, he's starting off hot and then he kind of, is finishing the year off dealing with injuries. I think, he'll be healthy from start to finish. I think he's in a proven year as well, especially because last year, him and McCaffrey were neck and neck fighting for that award. McCaffrey's happened to finish healthy. And we all know McCaffrey, the reason why he was kind of overlooked in these past years was him, struggling to stay healthy in back-to-back years. And so I think with that reason, I think Tyreek Hill's going to run away with that. I think defensive player of the year will be T.J. Watt. I believe that Pittsburgh's defense will be, arguably the best in the league, top three in the league this year based off of those additions. And I think that that'll sort of add to his depoy campaign and him, winning his depoy award after last year. It kind of was apparent that, he got robbed, in a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah.
Offensive rookie of the year.
Yeah.
I think that, this isn't really much of a debate. It could be, even to lean towards Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors. But I think Caleb coming to this offense with this loaded roster, I think without a doubt, this award is anchoring in his favor.
Yeah. We share the same MVP and offensive rookie of the year. We'll talk about the coach of the year as well. But my offensive player of the year, Tyreek, was number 2. I had Jamar Chase as winning it. Just going out on a limb, right? I want to throw out a different possibility there. And then the defensive player of the year, saying that we both believe Detroit's going to be really, really good, and we both don't have the Pittsburgh Steelers making the playoffs. I think for that reason, TJ Watt's going to get snubbed of the award. And Aiden Hutchinson, I threw out there as a potential candidate, or Sauce Gardner. Both those guys, I think, could take jumps this season and be on really good teams. So they have the narrative, of course, and the team success behind it.
I would say, too, a sleeper pick, and this might sound crazy. This might sound extremely crazy for the MVP. But just what if since, this team is going to be at the top of the league, they very well could be the best team in football and rally out 14, 15 wins. Just based on how great they are.
Jared Goff's not going to win it.
What if Jared Goff was to somehow make a crazy push and throw like 40 touchdowns and 10 interceptions and win it? You never know.
Since he's entered the league, he has the most passing yards of any quarterback. That includes Mahomes. I saw that statistic there in that preseason game. But it's a quarterback-driven award.
Yeah.
Something just tells me that they want to give that award to him. It just seems like that would be out of place. Like a Matt Ryan winning the MVP. Seems out of place.
Right. It would definitely be an outlier, and I wouldn't, and I don't see it, but just what if? That would be absolutely crazy. And so for my defensive rookie of the year, I have Jared Verse. I think, I kind of wanted to be different. I think other than, Latu. I think that, this guy coming into this Rams team, and I think the Rams are not only going to win games this year, but I think overall they did a great job of sort of, building up this defense. So I think for him, he's coming to a good spot where he's coming to, not only, an experienced team, but also guys that, kind of take off the load off of him, take off the pressure off of him. He can come in as a rookie, and his job is going to be simplified. And so for comeback player of the year, I have Rodgers, but, I think it's close between him and Joe Burrow. I just have the Jets, being a better team this year, being a higher seed, winning their division, and now Rodgers, having a resurgence year. And so for Coach of the Year, I have Dan Campbell. Like I mentioned, I think the Lions are going to be a fan favorite, a media favorite, for the NFL this year. I think the Lions are going to be a great team. And so I think it'll be perfect for Dan Campbell to win this award this year.
Yeah, I have the same comeback and the Coach of the Year pick. I went with Leatu Latu. I've been hyping him up since midseason last year in college football. But episode 204. Of course, at this point in time, if you missed Tuesday's podcast a couple days ago, we ran through the top 50 players in the NBA. Tons of controversy, and I'm sure none of you guys will agree with a single spot. So if you're interested, go check that out. It caps off our yearly series here on the channel. But episode 204, Amir, glad to have you back for one. It feels like it's been a month since you've been here. But two, I guess any last thoughts before we get out of here?
Not really, man. Next weekend, it's time. It's time, man.
Yes. Yeah, well, first week, again, it's going to start a stretch where from next week until February, we're going to have football every single week. Last thing I'll say, go follow this dude on IG. Go follow this dude on IG.